Hello, my name is Clarence Moore. I'm the founder of Seismic, powered by Winter Circle. And today, guys, I wanted to talk to you about two of the really important aspects of a business-minded person and what they need to understand and control. That is your attitude and your perception. These two are linked together so tightly that one cannot be talked about without the other. One will shape the other, and only by understanding the effects your attitude and your perception plays on you can you learn how to raise your lid, your limits. While talking, while actually thinking about this subject, it reminded me of a story I heard once. It was about a man that was caught in a blizzard. You see, back in 1972, there was a man in Alaska. He was traveling to see his family after like weeks on the road for his job. He promised his wife that he would be home for their son's birthday, which was the next day. As he came to a small town, he found that the road was closed for the next 3 days due to an oncoming blizzard. I'm not sure if you've ever been stuck in like anywhere because of a storm, but it's always the most frustrating thing in the world, especially if you're in a rush. Whether it's a few hours or a day, it's always inconvenient. So, of course, he was upset. He knew his hometown was only 7 miles away. And, he's driven in snow his entire life. Still, the authorities would not let him drive down the road with the storm so close and with it approaching. So he went to an inn and he used the phone to call his wife. And he couldn't bring himself to tell his wife like, "Oh, I can't make it. I'm in the town nearby, but they won't let me drive." He couldn't bring himself to say that. So what he told her was he was going to make it no matter what. It was only a few miles away, and he could easily walk it. So he drives to a clothing store nearby, and he buys the best hiking gear they had, which was rated for up to like negative 20 degrees. He saw on the news that the temperature may drop to negative 50 by nightfall, but he knew he had enough time. He was confident that that was enough time. He had the right gear, he had the right attitude, and he had enough time to make it. He set himself up for success. He had a plan, but that's not all you need to succeed. It's just one of the things you need. It's what it takes to make that first leap of faith to walk out on your own. So he started on his first mile, which was all downhill, so it came and went quickly. He pumped his legs to make sure he kept his body temperature up, but during that second mile, he reached the bottom of the hill. This is when the snow started coming down a little bit faster. He could feel it was a bit cold, but he thought about his family and he pushed through. And that's the second thing he needed to succeed. A why. He had a tangible goal to strive for, and it was something worth fighting for. And it was something he couldn't afford to lose. He had the fire, the self-imposed fire that he placed underneath himself to keep him warm in the storm. On that third mile, he approached the second hill and he began climbing. His hands were cold and the snow slowed him down. But he thought about his wife and child and he pushed on. He knew nightfall was approaching, so he had to hurry. So he pumped his legs. He warmed himself up by moving his arms around. And he said to himself, "I will make it. I will. I will." And that's the third thing he needed to succeed. He vocalized success. He let it ring out into the universe because he needed to hear his goals in order to visualize them. It's the same for us. He was focused on one thing, and that thing is what he wanted more than anything else. He wanted it more than he wanted to complain about the cold. He wanted it more than he wanted to turn around, than he wanted to wait out the storm, than he wanted to just call it quits. He wanted that more. So halfway up the hill, unfortunately he slipped, and he slipped all the way back down. But he quickly got back up, and he pushed forward, and he knew he could do it, so he said it out loud again. "I will make it. I will. I will." This is where most people would have lost their attitude. This is when, people face that setback that feels so much harder than it actually is. Or maybe it is. This is when people perceive failure. So they throw up their hands, but to him, It was another chance to get it right, to learn how to do it better this time so he could strategize so it doesn't happen this way again. And yes, it hurts to go back, but he had everything he needed to push forward. At the end of the third mile, he finally reached the top of the hill. He shook off his shivering by doing a couple of jumping jacks. And because, he was warmed up, he continued. He only had an hour before sunset, and he knew he had to make it home before nightfall. At the end of the fourth mile, he did the same thing. He did a few jumping jacks to raise his body temperature, and he said again, I will make it. I will. But then that fifth mile hit, and the sun set, and the temperature dropped, and he reached another hill, and his legs were cold, and he could not feel his feet. And this time, he said, I hope I make it. He tightened his hood, and he kept going. He slowed down as he dragged his feet in the snow, but through some miracle, he still made it to that last mile. But by this time, the temperature dropped, and it was so cold, he knew he could not make it another mile, and he was still going uphill. Night was in full swing, and even more disheartening, he couldn't see lights. He couldn't see the town. That's when he knew he would not make it, and it would only get colder from here. This time, he didn't do his jumping jacks. He didn't pump his legs or move his arms. Instead, he looked for a tree he could huddle under and wait out the storm. And then the next day, when the road opened, they found his body only a few feet away under a tree from the top of the hill. If he would have just gone a few feet further, he would have seen the lights from the town. And everyone was confused as to how he could have frozen to death, because the gear he was wearing was rated up to -20 degrees. And the crazy thing was, the storm never came through. It never dropped below 29 degrees. So what's the problem? He should have been hot wearing all of that gear he had. It was only barely past freezing on his end. It all started going downhill for him when he started giving up on himself. Yes, he had so much passion starting out, but when that adversity hit, whenever it started to wear down his mentality, his attitude shifted. He stopped saying, I will, and started saying, I hope. This left room for doubt to grow, for him to stop focusing on his why, and start focusing on all the negatives. In business, this may not be a mountain or freezing blizzards, but outside negatives try to shift your perception onto problems. He only had one more mile to go, and in only a few feet, he would have reached the top of that last hill, and he would have seen the town. He would have been reinvigorated. He would have kept pushing. He would have done his jumping jacks. He would have thought about his family. He would have realized it's not so cold. He would have felt warm. However, he never made it. And he never made it because he lost his attitude. Because he perceived the journey as undoable. Because he became the no. And when we become the no, we don't see the next opportunity. We don't learn from our mistakes. We don't push forward. We don't find our way home. What does this mean? It means we have to master our attitude. We have to have the perception of a problem solver. Because how you perceive a problem is how you will develop a solution. When the man in the blizzard saw a problem, he tried to come up with a solution. He tried to push through the storm so he could see his family. To us, it's the same as fighting for your goals. Every day you're in the field, you're gearing up for the storm. All the man in the blizzard had to do was focus, and that's an acronym meaning follow on course until successful. Even though he could not see the light at the end, he had the road. He knew the way. But the biggest obstacle wasn't the storm, it was his own mind. He told himself he could not do it, so he didn't. He said he couldn't make it, so he wouldn't. Whether you decide to push one more mile or turn back all depends on how you perceive the problem. Don't think of it as 5, 6, 7, 8 miles into the goal. Think of it as one more step, 1% better every day. Because in the end, what's one more step?